Welcome to tonight's Renewable Energy and Sustainable Living presentation brought to you by MAREA, the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Association. MAREA is a 501c3 nonprofit grassroots organization made up of volunteers dedicated to educating and engaging the public and advocating for renewable energy production, energy efficiency, and sustainable living. We encourage you to listen, ask questions, experiment with what you learn, and help others become more sustainable. I'm Phil Jones, tonight's host. This is our 10th and last meeting for this year. Because November and December fall too close to the major holidays, we'll be back in January, the last Tuesday of each month, to continue our presentations on renewable energy and sustainable living. We post past presentations and future registration links on our website at themarea.org or www.themarea.org, where you can also add yourself to our mailing list to receive our email reminders. Tonight, we are presenting passive design plugs into solar on green roofs in Philly. During the presentation, please mute your microphones. You can enter questions into the chat box, and at the end of the presentation, we will ask the chat questions to the presenter. Tonight's presentation will be recorded. And now here is Charles Coe to introduce tonight's speaker.
Well, thank you, Phil. Ron Celentano has been working in the solar industry field for 50 years. Yes, that's 50, with nearly 30 years focused on solar PV. He is currently the principal with Celentano Energy Services. His expertise covers technical and policy related fields, system design, installation, commissioning, testing, performance monitoring, project oversight, expert witness regarding technical assessments of PV systems and products, installer code official training, curriculum development, rebate program administration. He has been involved with helping shape most of Pennsylvania's state laws and regulations regarding solar energy for nearly 3 decades, including net metering, interconnection, PA solar share requirements, closing state borders, and many other policy-related issues. If this isn't enough, he is president of Pennsylvania Solar and Storage Industries Association, vice president of Mid-Atlantic Solar and Storage Industries Association for the Pennsylvania, and he is also the technical director of the Philadelphia Solar Energy Association. Ron holds a BS in physics and an MS in mechanical engineering. And MAREA is really honored and privileged to have a long-term member share his expertise with us this evening. Ron, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Chuck, for that wonderful introduction there. I just want to clarify, I don't actually have an MS in mechanical engineering. I in the area of mechanical engineering. So just to be clear, be clear on that. Is my screen up at this point?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, hello everyone. I'm really it's great to be here presenting on the topics. I have 2 topics here I'm going to be covering, and there'll be separate presentations, but I'm going to try to link them as quickly as I can. And I'm sorry I can't give you the full screen view of the PowerPoint. It's just like a glitch, not able to be able to do that. So you'll see on the side, the different slides that are there. So the first thing I'm going to be covering is basically giving you a solar update. And this is there'll be some correlation to what was done the last presentation by Penn State Extension, where they were doing big scale, large scale systems. This will be covering a tiny bit of that, but just generally across the board, the status of solar in Pennsylvania. And then I'll go into this passive design plugs for solar and green roofs in Philadelphia, which I had worked on several projects. So I will begin here, and don't get too concerned about all this detail. I'm not going to go over it very much. I just recently did this presentation for the Mid-Atlantic Solar and Storage Industries Association, but I thought I'd throw this in there. You're going to get a recording of this as well as a copy of the PDF, so you can follow up and give me a call or email me if you have any questions about this. But very quickly, giving you some of the status and the policy. We have, some of the lightning plan that the governor had put out, which House Bill 501 is the press plan. And then there's the 504, which is the community energy facilities. That's the other one. Reset is another one, 502. A lot of these, unfortunately, a lot of these bills are being held up, and it's mostly for two major reasons. One, the biggest reason is because of the budget holdup. That has not been passed, and that probably will not be passed for several weeks, and basically everyone is on complete hold and nothing is really moving at all. But and the other issue with regard to anything with renewables in general, the Republican senators basically are holding place where they are not very fond of RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is will be decided very soon, I believe, by the Supreme Court, whether it's going to be a go or not. And they basically are saying if that goes through, we're not going to be, because it's not, we don't know what's going through, we're not going to give any go-aheads with any renewable bills at all, including solar. So we have to see how that falls out, and whether that was really a if that's a really if they're just if it's a bluff or not, we're not sure. Let's see. I want to move down to real quickly. We have a lot of these issues that we have rate increases going out because of capacity auctions from PJM that was discussed last month at the presentation at Maria. I did want to point out memos that now these are memos of House bills or Senate bills that come out by legislators. And the one thing I want to show at the end of this particular part of this presentation is balcony solar, which maybe some of you have been hearing about. So I'm going to just move on, and you could, again, look at any of these things. If you have any questions or issues, you could bring that up afterwards, email me or call me, whatever about that. So moving on to this, I always like to put this slide up and kind of come up with this detail. How does Pennsylvania compare to the rest of the states on the East Coast? And in the upper left, we see a graph that's showing the cumulative megawatts that have been installed in these states, and we're coming up in eighth place there, or is it 2, 3, 4? Yeah, eighth. But when you do it per capita, we land in last place, and this has been consistent for several years. We always seem to be in last place when we compare ourselves to what's been installed relative to the population in the state. We land pretty much in last place, so we are really dragging behind. This is the actual accumulation of an annual accumulation of solar PV that's been installed. So the upper right is showing annual, and the lower left is showing the cumulative. So we're getting close. We're a little bit over 2 gigawatts of AC that's been installed. When you look at the right, you could see we're almost at the end of 2025, but we are falling short of what we had been installing in 2024, and that's because of a lot of large grid scale projects, and I'll be showing that a little bit later. This is of the number of systems that have been installed, both cumulative and annual. Let me see, going down here, and this is a breakdown of the AC versus DC broken down in categories. So I think of the less than 15 kW, sort of that residential size, and then categories. When you go past, particularly if you go past on the right side, on the AC side, if you go past to greater than 3 megawatts, that becomes a grid scale project. Okay, so that's not so we're really looking at about half of the systems that have been installed are DG systems, or distributed generation or behind the meter systems that are offsetting electric bills mostly, and the other half, another gigawatt basically, is going to be grid scale, and we can see a lot of systems that have been installed in very recent times, basically the past 2.5 years. And here's a kind of a breakdown of that a little bit in just the recent years. The gray bar is really showing the DC capacity. That's, of course, the total of all the solar panels, their rated values on like the DC array versus the AC or the inverter capacity, which is normally smaller than the DC capacity of any given project. But these are cumulative per year, or this is annual. But you can see basically how the grid scale has picked up steam really, in 23, 24, and even 2025. What I find interesting, though, is when you look between 2024 and 2025, there actually has been an uptick in the large commercial projects greater than 250 to 3 megawatts AC. So that's picking up a little bit more as well. So this kind of has that breakdown of residential versus small, large commercial, and grid scale. This is a scatter plot basically of, or bubble graph, I guess, of the number of systems that have been installed by county versus the megawatts of systems that have been installed as far as capacity. And you can see when you look at numbers of systems, you can see that it's really populated around the eastern, East Coast, Southeast Pennsylvania, and then west of around Pittsburgh area. However, when you look at cumulative of by county in terms of capacity, we see it more in the south central area, so where there's more rural environments for those big projects to go in. Hold on one second. This, I'm going to just kind of blast through this really quick. This is on the PJMQ side. This is the grid scale stuff that's going on. And it's kind of showing how there were so many, you heard about this last month, a lot of applications have been going on, and there's literally a jam up of a lot of big projects that are really moving very, very slowly in the queue. And this graph is really showing roughly how many it had peaked at about, quite a few. We were almost at over 20 gigawatts of applications that were in place. A lot of those have either went online, they've been constructed and went online, or they actually fell off. They were pulled out altogether. This one, I'm sorry, here we go. So this one shows the number of systems that are in construction right now. And so we're talking about a half a gigawatt almost that are in construction currently at this time. And some of these are pretty big, 120 megawatts, megawatts, sorry, and 90, 80. I mean, we have some large systems. And the graph, it's kind of showing, it's going up and down because as they go online, they kind of fall off this graph, or they, so they are at least in construction. And as time goes on, a new one might come in from an application standpoint and come into play that's where it's being in construction. This is showing the total systems that have come online in the past 3 years. And you can see in 2023 through 2025 up to current times, we've almost put in a gigawatt of PV systems. And again, some of these are pretty big, 100 megawatts, and then lots of 20s, 150 megawatts. You can see some of the big systems that have been put in place. This happens to be the current SREC price that we've been seeing lately, and SREC trade is always a good place to look for that. And so it's about that less than $25 in SREC. It's kind of strange as we've been very baffled for actually several years why it even can be that high, even though it's not as high as what's in Jersey or other places. It's still surprisingly high because we are very, very oversupplied. And in fact, what's happening is a lot of these projects are selling their credits into the tier 1 marketplace versus the SREC marketplace, and those prices are very close to each other. So that's probably one reason why. But still, we've met all the criteria for that. This is maybe you've been hearing about these merchant generator systems. So a merchant generator, that came up last month as well. A merchant generator is what we define as a system that can submit an application into the this is on the net metering side behind the meter, up to a 3 megawatts in size, and basically it submits an interconnection application where it might be on an open land with no load at all, so that when the system is constructed and in operation, it sells everything back to the utility, and they wait for the whole year, and then they get a big hefty check based on the price to compare. And right now, for example, PP&L territory, it's maybe about 12 cents that they would get for 12 cents per kWh is what they would get for that 3 megawatt size system. So there's been almost a gold rush in the past 2.5 years, as kind of shown by these graphs, how many of these applications have come in. Now, these graphs are showing, the little yellow part is showing on the left is the number of the number of systems, and on the right is the kW in size. So the yellow is actually the net metering projects. These are all over 500 kW at least. And these are applications. These are just that have been submitted. It doesn't mean that these systems have been installed, but these are the systems that maybe would be offsetting an electric bill. You can see the yellow is a very small bar as compared to the blue, which is really what's being submitted for these from these merchant generators. So you can see that there's a huge amount of bottlenecking, if you will, on the queue for the electric distribution companies behind the meter. And on the lower left, we're seeing tables by utility, how many of these systems are coming in, both by number of systems and by capacity. And on the left table is really from 2016 through just last week, whereas on the right it's just for 2025. So you can see the numbers of mostly PP&L is getting obviously quite a bit of them, but it's mostly on the western part of the state. I'm going to jump into talking a little bit about balcony solar, which you may have been hearing about. And this is very popular in Germany and other states, other countries in Europe as well as around the world. It has recently passed in Utah, and it's basically called plug-in. So this means you could buy. The concept is that you would buy. Hey, it could be from Home Depot, or it could be from IKEA, and you buy a solar panel with a plug at the end of it, and you basically take it home, hang it up off the side of your house, and you can just literally plug it into the wall. And that's the simple concept behind that. This has passed in Utah, and many other states are very interested in trying to draft bill language to do that, including Pennsylvania. In fact, it very well could be the end of this month or the beginning of next month. Something might come through as an introduced bill. You can, let's see, I think I had a link for, oh yeah, okay, so there's a link right there. That there's already a memo out there, a co-sponsorship memo, and that's the link for that. So you can go and see what how it's described for this particular bill. It's going to be coming out or being introduced soon. Let's see. So and what's interesting about this? So ideally, you can buy this, let's say, device, hang it up, and you could ideally plug it in, and you don't need to apply for an interconnection application. You don't need an electrical permit. You don't need to have an electrical inspection. You just plug it in, and it's offsetting your electric bill. And it might be very little, because it may only be 800 to tops 1,200 watts of a system. The one thing that would be that you wouldn't be allowed to do is to backfeed onto the grid. So you basically offset some of your electric load, but not to the point where you're actually you're uploading anything onto the grid. Now, there are a couple problems that some of us have wondering about when you have this kind of system, and I saw some of this too, and I actually contributed some questions about it too. There's three factors that are a little bit concerning from a safety perspective. One is touch safety, and then there's breaker masking, which I'll go into a little bit more, and the bidirectional ground fault circuit interrupters. So the safety factor is that the particular IEEE 1547 and also with the UL standard, when you shut off, when you have a blackout or when you shut down an inverter for a PV system, it is still live or hot, if you will, from the standpoint, and it's supposed to be within 2 seconds cycle down to zero. So you have capacitors that are discharging, so it's at a safe level, and it cannot backfeed onto the grid. If there were an outage, that linemen would be affected by that, so it would be pretty much shut down entirely. So the issue here is if you pull out this plug that you've just plugged in from this little balcony solar system, technically the male prongs on that plug would be live for at least about 2 seconds. So there's a little bit of an issue there. It would discharge within that period of time, but that could be a little bit of a shock issue. So that was the one concern. And the bottom one about the GFI, it's like, hey, it's just it's like anything else. You have GFI plugs, in your kitchen or in the bathroom, wherever there's water. This would be outside. You have GFI plugs outside as well. So that's why you would need, but here you would be plugging it into something probably inside your house. So there's a bit of an issue there. The breaker masking is an interesting phenomena, which I'll get into demonstrating in a few seconds. But I did want to point out that there's a really great white paper or a research paper, Barriers to Balcony Solar and Plug-in Distribution Energy Resources in the United States, and there's the link for that. And it's very interesting and gets pretty detailed in this. So I'm going to talk about a little bit, 3 more slides on this. What breaker masking means is, okay, so here you have an electric panel, and you would typically have a dedicated circuit that goes to several plugs. I mean, here we're showing 4 outlets, okay, and maybe you have a 15 amp circuit breaker that protects that wire. And maybe a number 14 wire, 20 amps that can run through that wire, and it works as it should when you, let's say, overload it. For, let's say, you put in a hair dryer and a toaster oven, and they're drawing more current than that 15 amp breaker will allow, and it will trip off because there's too much current being pulled. And it protects the wire from getting too hot, and everything is cool. So you just kind of you have a safety factor that's being taken care of over here. So here now you introduce balcony solar, and if you plug it into the last plug in that circuit, it probably won't trip the breaker now, even with those 2 loads on it, because what's happening is you're getting power or current flow from both ends of the wire coming in and serving those 2 loads. And even though those loads are exceeding the total on the breaker capacity or the breaker itself at 15 amps, it's being distributed across the wire such that it's not overheating. So this could be a situation where it could work perfectly fine. So the point is that it would be kind of important that the balcony solar is plugged in the very last outlet within a circuit. Now, the reality is no one knows which outlet in your house is the last one in your circuit. It would be pretty difficult to find what that is. But this is where it becomes a problem. And in this case, now let's say if I plugged it into the first outlet next to the electric panel. Now this is what we're talking about, the masking effect. So you have the same loads there, and what happens is they're both coming down from the same area, not across it's not being distributed evenly or across the entire wire. They're both coming from the same side of the wire. So what happens is the breaker does not see the overload, but the loads are still being served, and the wire is getting hot. It's exceeding what it's rated to provide, basically through with regard to current flow. So this becomes a problem. And so the answer to some of these things is that they're coming up with concepts of like having smart plugs. So you maybe have to have a plug replaced, typical plug replaced, where it can sense the flow of electricity through that plug and will shut off if it needs to, if it senses that there's too much draw, relative to what's going on there. So that's one of the that's all being kind of discussed about right now, and maybe there's going to be UL listing for certain types of smart plugs. So that is that. Let's see here. I'm gonna jump to. Let me see. Chuck, can you see this? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can see
Okay.
this okay. It's the
Okay.
same format that the other was in.
It says Philly Green Solar Roof.
Yep,
Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm jumping into this. This is what the other frame of this conversation is going to be about. Now, there's a lot of slides here. I'm going to jump through a lot of pictures. So I'll try to get through this pretty quickly here. So this is about basically some project that I worked on with.
Ron, do you want to try theater mode again and see if you can bring that up? Just to see if this is a different file. This is a different PowerPoint file, right?
Yeah. Oh, you want me to try to do
Yeah,
this?
see if that works.
You probably can't see that, right?
at the very bottom on the right-hand side,
Okay.
the last icon to the right.
Okay. I have a full screen. You do not?
No, we do not.
No, okay.
Yep,
Sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to give it a shot.
Yeah. We have it. Almost would try. Okay. Sorry about this. So this is kind of doing a real summary on what this is. So the Onion Flats is a combination of architectural construction group that was really working on passive house design, and this going back several years when they first did a lot of this. So and that's what I'm going to be going over. And they did basically 3 systems. They also they also work on green roofs, so they really cover the gamut on all the perspectives of passive house with green roofs. And they pulled me in to get into the solar design of some of these projects. And I just want to mention real quick, this was my my inspiration many years ago. Steve Strong, that is, you may be familiar with his book, but this is pretty much what got me started. Now, this happens to be at Jack's solar garden out in Colorado, and he was there, and so I took a picture of him while he was there. So I'm going to go over 4 different projects where it's going to be Belfield. These are all in Philadelphia, and they were all passive home or buildings. And this first one is, oh boy, okay, here we go. Okay, the first one is Belfield Homes. So this was completed in 2012. Now, this didn't have a green roof, but it did start the passive home projects for Onion Flats, and it actually was the very first certified passive home apartment building in Pennsylvania at the time. Basically, there were 3 row homes, Section 8 housing that they had built, and 3 stories. And we had solar that was put on top. And this is pretty much how it looked from almost an aerial view. This was, going back to this again, it's a 5.28 kW per home. And yeah, so this was again like certified at the time. I was going to just show you some quick shots of this being constructed. So these buildings were built off-site in a warehouse, basically. So very controlled environment, and they were built in sections, and you could see it being trucked along over here and put in place. And here they're using a crane to drop them into place, and then they really tighten them up. These are typically 3 panes of glass, or triple pane windows rather, super insulated, really getting to tightening up all the seams. Now, what's really challenging with this, of course, is the electrical and plumbing is all done per partial floor, if you will. And these are complete floors, I think, where they're dropping them in. But then you have to interconnect them after you drop them into place, and that's always been a challenge. You're trying to get it to everything, the plumbing, everything to land just right, but you still have some problems to coordinate that. But that eventually gets lined up, if you will. This is sort of the end product, if you of that project. And here's just some of the solar that was being assembled. Now we did use, unfortunately, we did use some pressure treated plywood to help with some of this racking, but it's mostly horizontally positioned on this roof. And yeah, so this was pretty successful at the time. I have to say, this was a long time ago, and I do not know on how well it's performing at this point at all, but because it was done for a particular owner. The next one was stable flats, number 2, and this one we did incorporate green roofs into this. Again, it was really a same type of thing, a 3-row homes next to each other, but 4 stories tall, and it was really market rate housing, so it was more high end. Although it was all very much designed as hard as they can try to make it a certified passive house, they just fell short of achieving that, and that's usually done with a blower door type of test along with other things. They just fell short of meeting that criteria, but it was nevertheless still built for that. So each of these row homes at 4.23 kW per townhome, I should say, but they were typically 4. Let me see. I'm trying to think of some of the other details on this. There's nothing really. Triple glazed windows, super insulated. Same type of thing there. And this is how I was looking at from the. This is North of Liberties, by the way. So you can see the modules, the arrays up on the roof of these 3 row homes right here. Now, when we were starting to do this, it's always a compromise, if you will, on how do you get the most solar, but still allowing for ambient lighting or indirect lighting, diffuse lighting to go in and feed the green roof, if you will. So it was a balance. You're not going to get the best orientation to get the most generation, but you also want to be able to have your green roof, work well. So this is the end product of that. And this is probably a couple years afterwards when it was already installed. So you could see some of the greenery that is there. Here is again now in the background there. What happened was the economies kind of were going south about that time. So Onion Flats wasn't able to continue with the full development of this. So that was sold off to another developer. So they continued to build some of these structures, but they didn't have solar on them. So this is now I think this was the first time when about the time, this is about 20, I think it was 2014, when transformerless inverters came into play. Now of course transformerless inverters, you basically have to have different configuration with your DC disconnect. You have to have it both on the positive and the negative side in order to do that. The inverter was down in the basement. And let's see here, and we fabricated everything. Or I should say Onion Flats did all the fabrication. They welded all of these racking systems together. These basically talking about 16 width across the parapet, and we use Unistrut to span that area and to load these Panasonic modules on top of them. It was an interesting challenge to be able to get the right fasteners to be able to hold those modules down in place. But that all eventually was that all really worked out well. The next project, third project here, is Capitol Flats Apartments, and this was now a next step up, and it really was an apartment building. Those the previous ones were row homes really, but this is actually now a 4-story apartment building, which had 25 units, and the attempt was try to do a net zero energy, but it wasn't going to really happen because there's not enough surface area on the roof in order to do that. But this was a 77.7 kW system that was installed on top of the roof here for this building. And what was interesting about this too is that Onion Flats did you can see there's two 1,000-foot deep geothermal wells. And this went really pretty much down into the Schuylkill, I think, pretty much. It was pulling up water from there. The crazy thing about this was it was not a closed loop. It was an open loop, meaning they sucked up actually all the water. And I don't know how they got away with doing that. And they realized, of course, it was crazy to do it too, because the filtering that was required was enormous. And a lot of upgrades had to be done in order to be able to filter all this river water coming in, and became really a problem actually at the end of the day. They did also have ground source, heat pump water heater, a big heat pump water heater that served the total building, so that water that either came up from the geothermal system, or water that was exited from there, it would pass into this heat pump water heater to basically begin its process of pulling heat, adding heat to that. So it would be serving the hot water, and then it would fed into two electric water heaters. But those never really went on. The temperature was really up to what it needed to be. They were really just holding tanks. Here is what that building ultimately looked like. Again, this is also in Northern Liberties. It was funny, the architect basically said to me that they were thinking of it would just be like a ballasted system on top of a flat roof, and was hoping that it would serve as trying to get net zero. Of course, I said, well, there's no way you're going to get net zero, but you're also going to get a lot less anyway, because of all the setbacks you'd be required to. He's like, well, how can we improve that? I said, well, if you lift the whole thing up above the entire roof, and you can get out to the full footprint of the building, you at least can get some more out of it. And he's like, okay, no problem. And they just erected that whole setup on top of the roof so that it could be expanded. So that's what they did. You could see that the posts were then installed on top of the roof itself, and that we were able to erect and install basically this whole array on top of that. This is kind of showing some of the internal supports that were used in order to do that, to give some support to those posts that were being put in place. This happens to be the wiring, just of kind of laying out the string wiring. This was a SolarEdge system. There were 5 inverters, and how the wiring was arranged for the layout of those systems. Here are all the modules. These are bifacial frameless modules that went into play. And let's see, hold on. And this is it's in the process of being constructed on top of that. So has about a 4-degree pitch. And here is like sort of the home runs of all the wiring, because all the inverters are at one end of the building. So they were all being collected, running down the length of the building. Here are where the inverters are. There's 5 of them. There's 3 on the one side in the upper right, and then behind on the other side of it are the other 2. The electric meter, that's a solar meter there. We also had and then you could see the accumulation panel, which is over here. So all 5 inverters tie into here with their AC disconnects. And this is a zigzag transformer that we needed in order to comply with PECO's effective grounding rule. It turns out to be creating sort of a neutral of as a result of all this. it's a passive device. It doesn't really do anything at all, but it costs a lot of money. Let me put it that way. It was really a pretty unnecessary thing, and we were able to get out of not having to do it the next time around for the next project. So this is really the green roof kind of growing at this point, and you can see how the shading is, and also the lighting is passing through that. And then, so here's another view of that building, and there's a lot of, you can see on the lower part there were 13 parking slots underneath part of the building, and they set it up for EV charging. So they also had that in play as well. Now, what I also got involved in doing for them was monitoring. So this is kind of just demonstrating having CTs, these circuit transducers that wrapped around all the circuits that I could find. And we had a monitoring a company that was doing the monitoring for us. Unfortunately, that kind of fell to the wayside, so we don't have that anymore. But basically, we're able to really get a lot of detail and data from that. This is kind of showing what a typical day, would be on a good day and maybe a little bit of a cloudy day. The red is the total usage from the entire building, and then the green, of course, is the generation. So you could see during the day that the generation would far exceed what the usage was. But of course, it would still not net meter in total. In fact, in the table below, it's kind of showing, at least for that particular year, 2020, about 57% was the offset from the solar. So about that much is being offset from the solar system for the entire building. This kind of shows the annual generation relative to PV watts. So the PV watts is the yellow bar, and everything else is a year after that, and how it compares to that. And there's some couple strange outliers there, but basically you can see, it's a little above, a little below. It really kind of depends. Sometimes you have very, very irradiant years or months rather, as compared to others. So that is the green roof, and it's in the springtime, doing very, very well. So it's very interesting how that really would turned out. I think is my time okay here? I got my last one here.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, so here's the last one, the fourth one, which was even more insane. It kept getting more and more crazy, but it was exciting. So this one was another 4-story apartment building, again, attempting to be a passive home design. Didn't quite make it there, but it got pretty close to it. 172 kW system, and again, bifacials, frameless modules. But the architect really wanted to try to achieve net zero. So how do you do it? Well, you don't have enough on the roof. You got a 4-story building in the city. Forget about it. So the idea was, hey, let's put it around the east, west, and south walls as well. Even though it's not optimum for getting solar, at least it's picking up some more of that irradiation, and you're able to get some more generation going on. So we almost achieved that, which I'll be demonstrating. But it also went over another green roof for this. Now this particular was a little different. It didn't have a geothermal system at all. It was really very efficient HVAC systems that were per unit. So they each had their own usage, basically, for all these apartments. And again, these are 28 units in here. This is on the right is the rendering of what that system was that construction was going to look like, and on the left is the actual. Now, you can see the openings are basically around the areas where the windows. So there were facade. These are basically facades where the PV is hanging on. They had created or developed and welded these supports that were mounted onto the outside wall, and then we put the rails onto those mounting structures, and then the PV was mounted onto that. This is sort of an aerial shot of that. And you can see with regard to a green roof, we ended up not really, I mean, there was not anywhere as much exposure of sunlight coming through that top. So really kind of close it up more and more and more each time they were trying to do this to see how well could this work and could you still get enough coming in for a green roof. But you can see that we got the L train right here on the right side on the east. This is the east side. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that's the east side of that. And I want to point out too, later on I'll show you, this particular array was all on one particular inverter, and you can see how it performs relative to the others. So there are 5 inverters for this system. 2 of them are covering everything on the rooftop, and the other 2 are covering the south wall. This is the south wall and part of the west wall. So this is the kind of frame structures that they had welded and made many of in whereby were mounted onto the walls of the building. And this is now the construction part. So you can see these being mounted over on the right side. You can see how they're mounted onto the outside of the building. And the rails were then installed anchoring onto those structures. Just kind of showing some of the insides of that, looking down from the roof down below and seeing how it's attached with the rails in place. This was sort of just a drawing of just to make the precision had to be like down to the 1/8 inch whatever or less here to make sure everything was going to fit properly. This was a maps that I had drawn up that were really very important because this was, again, was a solar edge system. These had optimizers, 1 optimizer per 2 modules. They had to be placed onto those rails very precisely in order to line up where those modules were going to be connected to. So this was a whole mapping structure of how this was all going to be put together. And I have to say, there was no solar company that did this, by the way. I mean, I was a solar consultant, getting my hands dirty. I did some of the wiring, but it was more about the labor, the labors that were worked with Onion Flats that were unbelievably terrific, and how they just knew they were very dedicated and committed to doing everything right. So they followed all the very detailed instructions that I was giving them in oversight. I think the only times anything kind of got a little misguided was because of me, but they always did the perfect job in what they were trying to put together. So these were the kinds of drawings or maps I had on the roof, so everyone could follow what to hook up and how to hook them up, and that worked out quite well. This is kind of showing these rails with the optimizers being installed, and you can see these are the clamps that squeeze onto the frameless modules. And this was kind of an issue that kind of came up in midstream of this being installed. I was very concerned that these clamps really slide down a track inside these rails, and I was a bit concerned that if they could end up being loosened up, these modules might slide down. So we ended up putting these in fixing these, basically these mid clamp under the mid clamps, these plates that were screwed right into the rail, so these could never really slide down. Getting close here. This is, again, the modules now going up in place after the optimizers are already in place, and they were sometimes put up, taken down again, put up, taken down, because they had to line up just right in order for it to all fit right. Another shot. This is actually Tim McDonald, the key architect and CEO of Onion Flats. And you could see how this is really kind of being well put together. This is on the roof, over the green roof. Another shot of how this looks. And this is now looking down through that whole structure, of all these racking structure pieces and how complicated it was. Sometimes he had to get out while this was being, to get some of the wire ties in there to tie up some of the wire whips, from the modules, how to climb into this. It's about 18 inches of space that you can kind of walk around inside there. It was kind of crazy indeed. This is now on the upper roof, where the green roof would be planted, but you can see how this is all looking. You could see up in here the openings that you could see the modules right there. Both on that was the south facing part of it. Here is some of the wiring being all coming together to where the inverters are going to be, which just happens to be right about here, and I'll show you that in the next slide. So here are the inverters. All 5 inverters are under in the green roof area, but it's there's the steps that go up, which has a solid. It was like a roof over in this particular part, so these were protected from the elements. And on the left side is the accumulation panel where all the inverters come in, and they have the AC disconnects there. On the lower left is where in the basement now, where all the 480 volt is a 480 volt systems come down into a step down transformer, going from 480 to 208, and then tying into the service. This happens to be just a courtyard that they have at that site. So here's the green roof. I just took this recently, so you can see how it's not as robust as what was in the other project, the Capitol Flats project, but there is definitely a fair amount of green vegetation that's growing well, even though there's a lot less light there. Here's a nice shot from the above, looking over the city. So I mentioned before that I was doing a lot of monitoring. So here is showing the E-gauge monitoring system that was used to monitor the usage, as well as the solar from this project. So there are CTs that are on every single circuit for every apartment and for all kinds of uses throughout, and it gets pretty hairy in how this all gets worked out. And here's like a map that I would kind of have to put together in terms of what CT is going to what particular circuit, and these are 3-phase circuits there. This is a graph of the generation in the upper. Well, the pink is the gross usage of the building, and the green is showing the generation. So obviously this third one to the right is a good clear day, doing almost 90 kW. Yeah, so that's basically what's happening. And then on the lower bottom is showing the PV watts as compared to the gross generation of what actually happened. And again, it's relatively good. And there were some crazy days. I was checking these out. Why were some of these really? I mean, there were some months that were just outliers in terms of either their generation, either the amount of radiance either over amount or an under amount. So that's what really was happening. This is showing a particular on a monthly basis for this particular 2024, and by month. So you can see now it's the apartment buildings, all 28 of those units, what the consumption was in terms of their usage, then the solar generation, and there was any net. So you could see that in the shoulder months there was a net, basically over generation for those months, which carried over into the following month on their billing. And at the bottom, you can see the final table there that I just quickly put together, how much of that solar offset was there for the apartments. And it was, for 2022, we practically made it. 99% of all of it was met by solar. There were problems in 2023 with one of the inverters having arc fault problems and shutting down prematurely. In fact, I'm dealing with that right now as we speak again. But for 2022 and 2024, basically that system was working pretty well, meeting most of what was trying to be achieved. And let's see, let me just do that. Okay, and this is what I found interesting too. So this is coming off of the Solar Edge graphics or monitoring system. So in the upper right is the sum of all those 5 inverters on a good clear day. But on the lower bottom is showing what each inverter looked like in terms of what it was producing at that same period. So the one that smallest curve that you see there was actually the one that faced the east. So right about 9 o'clock, I mean the sun rises and it's hitting it right smack on, and that's where the L train is actually running to. And then by 9 o'clock, it's that sun has moved over to the south side and past the plane of that east wall, and it would drop off very quickly down to about a kW. So after 12 o'clock, it's just generating a kW even throughout the rest of the day. So this was kind of an interesting thing how these all sum up together to the upper right graph. And finally, this is sort of another aerial shot of all the different perspectives from a drone to see how this looks like a Darth Vader building, but it's kind of cool to see how that all looks. And that is it. That's just some stuff about me, but that is pretty much my end of presentation.
Great. Thanks, Ron. We have some questions. Chuck will lead those with Tom. And Chuck, go ahead.
Okay, Joe, do you want to get the first one? I'm still looking for the chat here. Joe, are you there?
I can start.
Okay, what did they sell for is the first one?
Yeah.
Is that
Yep.
okay?
What did the solar? I mean, you mean okay? You're asking cost.
This was asked early on, Ron, at 7:30. So just as you were getting into it, and I think trying to get an idea of what was the the economics here.
Yeah, well, sorry, that part I couldn't tell you, and it's very hard to figure that out because it's not like typically, oh, here's an RFP, let's get a proposal, here's a solar, and it's going to cost whatever $2.50 a watt, and then you could do the economics. Because this was all sort of in-house, it was it was kind of murky to really come up with that installation costs. It really was not established very well. There's a lot of gray areas, so it's hard to say what the economics really pan out to be. I would say, I mean, there's benefits, of course, by there's no profit made, in terms of from a solar installation company, if you will. So there's some savings there. But then, the reality are there's always kind of hiccups along the way. So it's very hard to come up with the answer to that. Sorry to say.
That's okay. How about this one's a little bit easier. What type of plants and vegetation is on the green roof?
No, that's harder.
Oh,
No, I really don't know. I didn't get to that level of detail. I think on the front flats, I know for a while it wasn't really growing very well, but I learned that someone that worked on the green roof part. This company, by the way, has done a lot of different projects. Like I think they put the green roof on the barns, and a few other places. Some really nice projects that they worked on. But so they've done a better job at what they planted there that work well in more shaded environments. So that's why that was actually looking better under the front flats. The last project I pointed out, but I don't
okay.
know.
And
Sorry to say.
the purpose of the green roofs is for water retention? Is that
Yeah,
basically what they're?
Yeah, it's really something to do with the city itself. I mean, you get points of, and what are those points? I mean, I'm not exactly sure. Probably someone there can tell me, in fact, what it means. But you get some kind of credits or points by having a green roof that's going to offset some of the stormwater, helping stormwater management, in the building. So that's what was, achieved. It also provides a cooling effect as well. In this case, it provides a super cooling effect because you have the solar on top of the green roof. In fact, that's the other point to be made about those solar panels on the sides that are also serving as a cooling effect on the building.
Okay. For the Capitol Flats project, were there load or wind load issues as a result of raising the panels? How
There
was
was
that
none.
handled relative to the approvals?
Yeah, I have to say, I don't, yeah, it's funny. There was no issue with regard to that. I don't know if with the city was rather lax. In fact, I can tell you with the front flats, I was really concerned when I was getting the electrical inspection. And I mean, they didn't look at anything. They were like, okay, good, check. It looks cool, man. And they walked off. I mean, I couldn't believe it. So I have a feeling that there really wasn't too much. Uh,
Weren't sure what it
Scrutiny.
was.
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of like, oh my God, really? But I should say that there has never been any. That's really rock solid on the Capitol Flats building. There's no movement at all. That stuff is really in solid shape.
Good. How about the lightning protection?
Well, there hasn't been any. I mean, you are grounding
You're breaking up there, Ron. Not
everything
sure why.
down, and bonding everything, but how about now? Anything
Yeah, you're
better?
okay.
No? Oop.
Yeah, you're okay.
Oh, I see yeah, it pops up. Your internet connection's unstable. There hasn't been any lightning issues. Everything's been bonded and grounded properly. Of course, these modules are frameless modules, so it's only the racking that needs to be grounded. But there hasn't been any issues whatsoever.
Okay. What is the composition of sheeting on the roofs and how does one make repairs?
I'm sorry, what
It says, what is the composition of sheeting on the roof? And how
what
does one make repairs if the solar panels are there? I guess what they're saying is, how
oh,
do
okay.
you
Well,
fix the roof if the solar panels are on?
Well, you have access. I mean, they're 8 foot above the roof, so probably the roof can still be worked on if that were be
Okay,
the case. There
I
are
assume
patio
they're
sections on both of these buildings, so there's like a little, and then there's barriers for not going onto the green roof itself. Um, there was a case where that one of the modules was shattered because there was construction next door to that building on front flats, and that was easily, just replaced, and that was not an issue. They do have extra solar panels that they have in storage.
okay.
so were these all membrane roofs, Ron?
No, well, not no, they weren't member. I mean, they're green roofs, meaning that you're actually you have, I don't know,
But
I can't remember how deep the
but the
soil is.
plants were on top of a membrane
Yeah,
setting.
I mean, right. There's going to be some sort of membrane or waterproofing, of course, so that water doesn't pass into the
Okay.
building. But I don't know the details of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a good question about the fire department. Do they consider this type of roof an electrical fire? Is solar roof fires considered electrical fires? And are they reluctant to address this hazard?
Well, I mean, if the fire is created from the solar system, I mean, it's electrical fire either way. In fact, it's funny because I'm actually an expert witness on a project in Jersey right now with regard to, was it the HVAC system that caused the fire, or was it the solar system that caused the fire? And that's sort of up for uh, determination, if you will. And it's easy to point to the solar system, but more often than not, it's not the solar system that causes the fire, but it would be an electrical fire. And if there were a fire there, um, I mean, the fire department would have to first you'd shut down the system, of course, and because it's solar edge, those are, and they have optimizers. They bring, and there's a rapid shutdown, so it brings down the voltage down to, like, under. Let me see. I think it's well under 50 volts, the safe level that they can work on that area without being a risk or a hazard to them.
Interesting. Okay, for solar roof installations, what kind of response is there for, hold on, I can't read, for, I can't read one word, but,
It's fire code designers.
oh, okay. Joe, do you want to read this?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so for solar roof installations, what kind of response is there for fire code designers concerned about roof access?
For residential or yeah, I'm not sure I totally understand the question. I mean, you typically, well, that's what setbacks are all about, right? So, at least for commercial buildings, you have to have a certain, and I don't know off the top of my head what they are, but there's a certain number of inches or feet actually that you have to have setback for responders could walk around, the area so they can get to the fire or even around the modules. And they have to also be set back from any kind of equipment, that serviceable equipment that's on a roof. On a residential, actually, we are in the midst of transitioning into the next code level in Pennsylvania. Beforehand, and even maybe even currently, you can bring modules all the way to the edge of the roof, but depending on the ordinance of a given municipality, you may be limited to, you have to be 2 to 3 feet away from the edge or the ridge or from the eave. Depending on what it is. But the code that's going to be coming upon us very soon will require at least about 18 inches, I think, from the edge of the roof or more. And so
Okay,
that's a pathway for firefighters to they're able to climb up to the roof, on the side, and they're able
yeah,
to work on the roof. Yeah.
okay. For the solar legislation changes, are they primarily controversial due to Reggie, or the proposed solar changes are also controversial in and of themselves?
Both. So, well, no, I should say not the first one at all. The solar has nothing to do with Reggie at all, but it is they're using. I'd say there's some senators, and I say senators, Republican senators, that are probably using it as an excuse to not having to do anything. So they're using Reggie as that prop, in order to say we're not going to do anything because this thing is going to be basically a carbon tax that is going to be, increase everyone's uh, cost of electricity. They might be saying. Others, but I have to say it is split. It's not to say that everyone is totally opposed to solar. Some of them are opposed to it covering, farmlands and things like that. But at the same time, it's like, hey, the farmer should be the one who chooses whether they want to have solar on their property or not the legislator. It's not necessarily affecting crop growth. In fact, I have a great slide I should have put in here where I've done, you kind of show how much grasslands, woodlands, and everything else there is in Pennsylvania, and 10%, to me, 10% solar barely even touches the amount of acreage that even covers, all the farmlands and grasslands that are out there. But there's also this myth busting we have to start to work on, where you could hear about it more in other states, but it's starting to migrate even here, that there's leaching from solar panels, the heavy metals going into the soil, contaminating the water. And these are like crazy, totally solar opponents that are just spinning this complete lies, basically. And this is the kind of stuff we have to really educate a lot of legislators about, as well as other people too, because some of these townships are also opposing some large systems that go into their onto some open lands.
Okay, I think we're through with the questions. I have one, Ron, related to bifacial versus front-facing panels. How much additional efficiency do you gain from having bifacial panels in an area like Philadelphia?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to say, I was hoping to see that in these two projects that had the bifacial. And in fact, what I wanted to even do, and I never got the chance, was to cover over, let's say, a couple of modules or a string of modules, since all of them were facing the same way and same capacity, and everything, and just try to do a comparison on their output. And I never had the chance to really carry that out. I've seen I would say, and it's also depending on what the background is. So if you are on, you definitely should be putting bifacial modules on a flat roof that has white EPDM or some kind of a white roof coating,
Yes,
because you really pick it up from the back. I'd say
yes,
maybe you get another 10%, is maybe the best. Some will argue far more than that, but I don't think that's true. Because it's ambient, so you're not going to get the same as direct radiance. The one thing that's pretty interesting, though, too, about what they're finding, even though solar modules have a like typical 25-year life, talking with Bill Brooks, who's like the national expert on a lot of this stuff, he's been coming back with saying that they're in fact only lasting about 15 years because of the inferior products that are coming out of China. With the backsheet, the plastic backsheet is inferior and starts to break down, causing those modules to short prematurely. So what's kind of interesting about having the bifacial is it's glass on the front and the back. So now you actually have a much more
robust.
robust, panel
Yeah.
when you have that. Of course, you have to take into account that it is now a little bit heavier now as well.
When you say 10%, you're referring to 10 relative percent based on the
Yeah,
nameplate?
I'd say,
So
you
like
get,
two additional,
well, like,
well,
okay, maybe whatever you would
eight,
normally get, that considering that 100% of optimum, whatever, you get maybe 110%, so you get a little bit
yeah,
more,
okay, got it, okay. All right, well, thank you very, very much for a very informative and insightful presentation and wonderful questions. Phil, do you want to wrap up here?
Yeah, I also want to thank you so much, Ron, for sharing
Sure.
with us a lot of different things. Lots of fascinating stuff. I'm really excited to hear about this balcony solar and some of the legislation that's coming through. So we'll love to hear back from you if you have any uh, comments, future comments, or additional things you want to add in. Just let us know, and we'll post it on the website along with your presentation.
Okay, and likewise, anyone has any questions, whatever, they can email me or call me, whatever, and I'll help clarify anything that was not clear in my
Okay,
presentation.
that's great. Well, thank you so much, and thank
Okay.
you, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing everyone back at the end of January on the last Tuesday of the month. So thanks, everyone, and have a happy holiday season.